They say all is fair in love and war. They say love is a battlefield. I'm your host, Job Gomez. Welcome to the battlefield of love. So I got cheated on. What do I do next? Well, my first advice would be the advice that I was given, and it's don't do anything permanent for your temporary emotions. And speaking about emotions, you're going to be going through a lot of them. You're going to feel confused. You're going to feel a lot of anger. You're going to want revenge. You're going to be stuck between should I stay or should I go? If you have kids, it's going to be more of can I stay for them? There's going to be a lot of confusion swirling around. A lot of things are not going to make sense, especially if you were a provider. Your identity is going to be broken. You're going to feel shame. You're going to feel rejection, emasculation. You're going to want to hide. You're going to want to numb. You're going to want to drink. There's a lot of things you're going to want to do. There's a lot of things I did right. There's a lot of things I did wrong. And depending on your temperament is you want to act in violence, and I would strongly suggest against it. The first thing I did is I called the person and I left them a voicemail, and I'm like, alright, if you think you can handle a family, if you can support a family, then here you go. You won. And looking back at it, I was just acting out of pain. And luckily, at the time, I was actually going to a therapist, which is another thing I would recommend if you can. At the time, the insurance I had would only give me, I think, like a month of sessions that they would pay for, and then they would charge you out of pocket. But hey, that month was a lifesaver. And the guy actually said, bring your wife in and we could figure stuff out. It was to no avail, obviously. But what I would recommend is what he recommended to me, which was journaling. And at first it was kind of dry. Like I was like, I feel like crap, blah 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 blah. But I got this book called Writing Down Your Soul by Janet Conner. It's a little esoteric, but it's what is it called? Writing Down Your Soul: How to Activate and Listen to the Extraordinary Voice Within by Janet Conner. And I kept I kept like imagining them two and like wondering why this happened to me. And the therapist said to me, you're hurting yourself more because you're putting yourself in their bubble. See, what they did was between them two, and you're out over here, but you want to put yourself in that bubble. So when I started writing and got better at journaling and like listening to my voice and reading this book and telling me how to connect with God or your inner voice, I was kind of mad at God at the time. That's another thing I wrestled with. I left the faith. I left any kind of faith and I was just hurt. So one of the breakthroughs that I had was when I wrote down like of how I was feeling, and all of a sudden like I broke through in my journal, and I finally wrote down like, hey, you're worried about her, and you're worried about getting revenge, and you're worried about all this stuff. It's like, but when are you going to take care of me? And I was like, holy crap, I finally found that voice, found my voice to myself. And I just remember just like finally connecting with my internal voice. And that was the first step to healing. Jocko Willink talks about detachment. When you write something down, you put it down, you get it out of yourself, put it on paper, and then you could step away from it and look at it as if somebody else was looking at it. So you detach. And when you detach, you can read it, you can rip it and burn it, you can do something, but it's coming from the inside out. So let me tell you what's going to happen. There's going to be waves. It's not going to go away. It's been nearly 10 years for me, and there's different times, like right now, talking about it and really going into it, and it still hurts. And no matter what your take on it is, or like I've spoken to some people about it, or people give me their opinions regardless of whether I ask them or not. It's like, oh, you should just get over it, this and that. And it's like, that's fine, okay, cool. But the reality is, it's deeply cutting. It deeply hurts. I experienced hypervigilance afterwards. I should have left, honestly. I should have just had the guts to get up and leave. But I didn't, for my kids, and I stayed for way too long. I actually slept in my kids' bedroom, and the kids slept in our king-size bed with my ex, I think for like 2 years. And it was just painful every day. I cried on my way home every freaking day. And I was doing it for them. But the truth is, there's a quote that Philip Folsom always says, and it's like, you would rather live in a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven. So that's what I did. I stayed for too long. And it was toxic. It was painful. We tried working it out. It didn't work. I felt more like a warden than a husband. It was everywhere she went, I had her check in. I couldn't trust her. The trust was broken. And the freaking amount of energy you expend trying to check on somebody, it's not worth it. I was just so exhausted all the time. I blamed myself for everything. Then I would put it on her. Then I would put it on the dude. I isolated. I stayed away from all my friends because it's embarrassing. I didn't know who I was because I was no longer a husband. I mean, we were still married by law, but it was broken. Until I decided to leave. And when you decide, the root word of decide comes from the Latin, the side, like homicide, like suicide is to cut away or kill, right? When you decide is you take away all the other options. When I decided to finally move on and move away from this person, that's when I got healing, because I got separation, because I wasn't watching this person that I wanted back. I started working out. Started, that was another good thing that I did, was get back into my body, and also writing down my journal was another way I could heal and I could detach, because you need to expend that energy elsewhere, or else it's gonna just bottle up and it's gonna swallow you whole, and you're just gonna be a freaking time bomb waiting to explode. So when you decide to move on, and it's up to you. Everybody's individual. Everybody's own individual life has separate components. There's men that I know that the woman relocated without the man knowing, and they ended up in another state because they wanted to stay with their kid. And it's a tough decision. I know I thought about it. I thought about it just disappearing and never coming back. But I had my kids, and I wasn't going to let them down. So if you just got cheated on, my advice right now would be to not do anything permanent, because you're not thinking rationally. You're hurt, and it's understandable. But when all is said and done, when you look back and you see the tether that you cut, the chains that you broke with this person, when they finally show you who they really were, it's going to be a breath of fresh air. You're going to be able to level up, and not only level up yourself, but the type of people you meet, and you're going to find your weaknesses. And if you are able to deal with them, you're going to make them your strengths. In my relationship now, from learning all the things I did, specifically from No More Mr. Nice Guy, Dr. Robert Glover, is you don't have covert contracts. And what that means is you don't have unspoken contracts that your partner doesn't know about because you're too weak, or you're too scared, or whatever. You don't know how to communicate your wants and your desires, and then they become requirements. Now you have requirements, right? I require this in a relationship. I require that in a relationship. I require this in a relationship. Can you meet my requirements? And if the person agrees, then you're all good. But they're also going to require stuff from you, and that's what's going to make it balanced. So I'll tell you, from the other side, it gets better. Is it going to be ugly? Is it going to be like crawling in mud with glass in it for a while? Oh, hell yeah. Like I said, it still stings. And I'm bringing it forward because it's hard to talk about. But staying with the devil, you know, staying with the familiar is comforting because we don't know. Through my journey, I was able to figure out, thanks to this therapist, is I was choosing broken women because I was broken. But if I was just a little bit better, she couldn't point out, or you couldn't see all my inadequacies, all the stuff that I needed to work on, because I was helping this person. I had that savior mentality. I also was able to figure out where the roots of all these inadequacies came from, why we actually went deep into like the type of pornography I watched. You know, I watched hardcore stuff where the man was very dominant. And what punched me in the face when the guy said is like, the reason you're watching this is because you don't have control over anything, especially your woman. And I'm not talking about, you know, being a puppet master, but what he was referring to was, you want to impose physical control or violent control in your fantasies because you don't even have control of your whole life. And as I learned was, you don't ever control. I mean, it's hard to even control yourself, right? Like your impulses. But when you come to a point of understanding the dynamics of how relationships work, you don't have to quote unquote control anybody. But when you choose wisely, when you do the due diligence, when you understand that you're not gonna allow low behaviors, you're not gonna tolerate people that don't have any kind of morals or values, or that their morals or values don't align with you, you don't associate with those people. But because you're so used to choosing these type of people because there's something that's missing, there's a little gap in how you choose people, being intentional about like, hey, this is my list of requirements, this is my list of things that I need from a partner, you don't deviate from them. You can obviously accommodate and you can make, you know, amendments for whatever, and then as you progress in the relationship, you know, stuff changes, there's more trust built. That's another thing. When my wife and I got together and decided to finally be a couple, the first thing was trust, right? That's the premium. If I cannot trust you, I'm bailing. Same for her, same for me. It's like, you know, she got cheated on, I got cheated on, and that was it. You know, trust is a premium. Her phone and my phone have access. My face is on her iPhone, her face is on my iPhone. Like, we can unlock. I have my iPad. I have, you know, there is no password that she does not have. We don't even check up in each other's stuff because we know if I wanted to, I have access to it. And that's how we leave it. Just open door policy, right? Another big revelation, another big thing that really, another punch in the face, was Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. it really set the tone for me going forward, where you don't put the blame on anybody when you take, quote unquote, extreme ownership for your behaviors. Then he went on to write the dichotomy, and then leadership, strategy, and tactics, which kind of goes granular into those points, because you have a tendency to go too extreme, where you do everything because you take ownership and you become the guy doing all the work. Anyways, when we were still dating, I hadn't cut everybody off from my dating pool, and there was a time when my wife was watching me train jiu-jitsu. She was my girlfriend at the time, and she had my phone, and again, open door policy, and somebody sent me an Instagram message, and this was person I was flirting with, and I hadn't told them that I was in a relationship yet. So we get to the car after training. We get to the car, and I notice she's a little off, and I'm like, okay, maybe she's bored. She's watching sweaty dudes roll around on the mats trying to kill each other. And I asked her, hey, what's going on? And she finally hits me with this. She's like, hey, who's this person? And in that moment, I wanted to like I would have normally done. I would have normally tried to change the subject, and I didn't. At that moment, because I was reading Chaco, I said, no, you're right. I didn't let everybody know that I'm, in a relationship. And as you know, I was dating. So that's on me. If you want to leave right now, that's up to you. And she took a minute with it. We kind of drove in silence for a bit, and then she just, hey, you know what, let's park and let's talk about this. And she's like, the fact that you did not deny it, that you did not try to spin doctor it and make it into something it wasn't, the fact that you owned up to it is what gives me confidence. It's what gives me trust in you. And that was mind-blowing for me, because I thought I was ready for the breakup and all this stuff, and didn't. So then we established protocols after that. I was like, all right, if there's somebody that you do not approve of in my life, that's a female or whatever, okay. And the same went for me. But that's an agreement that her and I came to. And that's where the communication and the agreements and the requirements is going to come later. This is a lot of stuff that I learned the hard way, getting to where I'm at right now. So again, it's going to get better. It's, at least you're going to get far enough from it. I mean, if you want to. But if you get far enough from it, you'll be able to look at it from a different perspective. And if you take the time to be intentional about, like, hey, I never want this to happen to me again, you will. Again, going forward, I'm going to be sharing all the stuff on how I got to the point where I got to right now. And I'm sharing what I've read, who I trained under, what I read, what I listened to, what programs I took to get into this position that I am in now. This is Battlefield of Love. tips, tricks, strategy, and tactics for relationships. I'm your host, Job Gomez. If you've been here this whole time, I appreciate it. Please please share this if you know that somebody's going through it right now. And stay tuned. And with that, I'm complete.